So we've got the first part, the bottom part of our clock in Inventor, and we have fixed the location of this at 0. So it's time to place our next part. So I'm going to go back to my place component. And in this case, I'm going to place the back part. So I'll go ahead and place the back. And we bring this in. Notice it is oriented the way I want, because this is going to sit on this long side here. So that's good, what's oriented what I wanted. But if it wasn't, I could very easily rotate this around. Now, I haven't left clicked or anything on this. So let me go ahead. I'm going to place this one here, and then I'm going to come over and we're going to have this other one. Now, watch what I do. So I can right click here, and now I've got my Y, Z, X, it's showing this. So let's rotate about the Z. So notice it doesn't really look like it's much different. So let's right click again, rotate about the Y. So rotate about the X. So you can see how we can kind of change the direction that we want and the way that we want it to get it in place and in position. You do need to kind of be careful though, as far as the way the arrows are pointing. Because sometimes you might have a feature on one surface or the other that needs to face in a certain direction. So for these parts, with the way they are at this point, they don't really matter. So it doesn't. The direction of the arrows isn't important for us. But there are times in the future, depending on what you're drawing, that they may be. So we go ahead and hit right click, and we'll go OK, because I don't need that part. All right, now. From there, we've got the part, and this is what we're going to work. We're basically going to attach this part here to the bottom piece of that. And the way that we do that is through what we call relationship constraints, or constraining that part to the other part. So notice, again, this still has the wiggle test. It doesn't pass the wiggle test. I can move this. This one passes the wiggle test. It's fixed, and I can't move it anymore. So we're going to have to put some constraints on this part to lock that in and tie it to this one as well. So when we do that here in the Assemble tab, your Relations panel, using the Constrain tool. So let me click on this, and let's just talk about the Constrain tool. So I've got several different types of constraint that I can place on these parts. The most common, or the mate, and there's two solutions to mate. There's what we call a mate and a flush. The mate would take one surface. So notice as I click here, the mate will take one surface. I'm going to left click on that. And then I mate it where it will basically attach that surface to the other surface, right? And hit apply. Now, this of course is not the way, let me cancel out of that. This is not the way that we want that, but you'll see I've made a relationship between the two surfaces of the part. So let me kind of move my front around here. So you can see I have kind of fixed that part to that face of that surface. And while I still have movement here in the X, I don't have movement in the Y. So I've constrained one of the degrees of freedom so that it's not moving. I'm going to rotate around to the side view here. Notice again, I can still move it this way, but I can't move it in the Y. So now I'm moving in the Z axis. If I rotate this around here, you'll see that I'm moving in the X, but I can't move in the Y. So I've got that there. Now, by the time we're done with this, we will need to move it and basically constrain it so it does not move in either the X, the Y, or the Z axis, or those planes, more or less. Let me go back to here. And I'm going to just kind of demonstrate this. So it looks like we're moving all over the place here. I'm going to just kind of demonstrate this idea here of your mate and your flush. So using this, and then we're going to come back with another video and actually do this the correct way. So let me come back up here to my constraint feature. And now instead of being a mate, I want to be a flush. And if you look at the arrows when we're flushing something, we're basically putting a smooth transition from one surface to another. So there shouldn't be any type of gap. So for this case scenario, I'm going to uh, flush. So I'm going to flush this side of the piece, or this edge, to this edge. Notice that both of the arrows here are pointing the same way. So I'll click apply. All right. Notice how now, let me cancel out of that. So now we're locked in on two of our axial planes. So let me go back here to my right plane. Notice the Z. So I have no movement now in the Z plane. I have no movement in the Y. So I've eliminated 2 degrees of freedom. So let me kind of come back over here now. Let's look at this. So I do still have movement in the X plane. So I still need one more uh, method, or one more way to fix this to place that so it's going to not move on me. And again, as I look at this, I will use my flush command here, but then I'm going to want this to be centered on that. So let me go ahead and we'll come back to my constraint tab again with the flush. So I'm going to click this surface and this surface. So we're going to kind of put these both together here like this. So you'll see how they're smoothly transitioned and flush both together. But obviously that doesn't look good, and we've got the round over there. So we want to send that over to the left of the screen a little bit. And we do that by use of this offset. So now we'll have to kind of do some calculations to figure out what that should be. But so for right now, I'm just going to offset this by 1 inch. Notice how far it moves. So, and now we're kind of plane over there. So we'll split the difference between the two, and let's just offset that a 1/2 inch. There you go. We hit apply. I'll cancel out of this so that I close that window out. And now you can see I have that part fully constrained. It is not going to move anymore. So now it's not constrained correctly, because I certainly don't want these two pieces to go together in my assembly like that, but it is constrained. So that's a brief introduction here of the constraint tools. The only two that we're going to need to use for this one is the mate and the flush. You'll notice there are others. We could put an angular constraint on that. We could put what's referred to as a tangent constraint on it. We could do an insert. We can do some symmetry. There's some motional constraints and some transitional constraints, but all of those get a little bit more complicated as we go. So for this activity and for the clock, the only thing that we really need is the mate and the flush constraints, and we can get everything done with this particular project.